Today in the EU, why Brussels' new crisis force won't be deployed just yet.
We do not need a European army. We need 27 European armies that can effectively work together to deter our rivals and defend Europe.
Brussels has officially approved its first ever crisis response unit. 5,000 soldiers ready to tackle urgent threats beyond the EU's borders. And at today's Foreign Affairs Council, ministers will focus once again on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But one thing is clear: these troops are not heading to Kyiv. So why won't the EU's brand new crisis unit be deployed to Ukraine? And if not there, where might they be sent instead? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. I'm joined in the studio by Euractiv's defense reporter Aurélie Pougnet. Hello, Aurélie, and welcome back.
Hi, Giada.
So after more than a year since the project was first laid out, the EU's first crisis intervention unit, RDC in short, is now fully operational. What is its purpose? Is the EU taking a step forward to finally having its own army?
Let's not pronounce the word EU army. We're still quite far away. This is a very important distinction to make. This is not the first step towards an EU army. We're talking about something that is not in opposition with the national armies, that is not in opposition with NATO.
Okay.
It's a force that is here more for crisis management and peace enforcement. Mm-hmm. So imagine maybe the UN peacekeepers, or maybe imagine delivering humanitarian aid.
Right.
Or imagine there's a crisis somewhere. Imagine Brussels is under attack and you need to evacuate everyone from the EU institutions because of whatever reason they are the first ones to take out. So this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about 5,000 people that are at the disposal of the European Union, its member states, and they can all together decide to use this force or this corps in case of emergency or long-lasting peace enforcement.
So where do these 5,000 soldiers come from?
They are currently in all the EU armies around Europe. So some member states contributed with people, some member states contributed with equipment. They are able to react, that's the idea at least, on air, land, sea. It also has a cyber component, a space component, and they are basically listed here at the EU so that the officials here have an idea as to what would be contributed should there be a need for it. And those troops are not committed under any other scheme, like not NATO, for example. But if each member state needs those people because they need them for very national reasons and domestic policies, then they can get them back.
Right. So I'm not an expert in defense, but 5,000 soldiers doesn't sound like a lot to me. How does this number compare to national rapid force units?
It's a great question. It's been decided as 5,000 because it's a round number. It's a number that is still big enough that you can do something with it, but it does not compare with, for example, what would be needed in Ukraine to stabilize or control the whole border as to what is now being under Russian occupation and Ukrainian authority.
So what is this number enough for?
It's enough as a first entry force. It's enough as a first component. It's people that you can send in the first place and be complemented by national army,
right,
or other forces or other corps that can be helpful as well. It's not people that would necessarily operate by themselves, but also 5,000, they can also be used for smaller operations. I think let's not think about them as the one can do all, and be used anywhere. It would be very ambitious, which it is in the first place, but let's not, I think, put too much pressure on it because whether it would actually even be used at any point is even just a question.
But so when it comes to strategy, why was it created in the first place?
It was created because they were already what was called the battle groups in Europe, which were a rotating force of a few people as well that were each semester led by a different country. The issue is that it was never used because, well, the country that was in the lead at that time had to pay for it if they were being used. And then also it was complicated. Each member state have their own priorities when it comes to crisis management in general. You know, like, do you want to send something in Gaza? Do you want to send them in Ukraine? Do you want to use them in the Western Balkans? So there was never really a moment where it ever was used. And when over the years the Europeans decided to become more and more independent in their own crisis management capabilities and just more independent, especially on the US or big countries, or be really able to do whatever they wanted, that's when they thought maybe a crisis management capability would really come in handy. And the main example is the Kabul situation, the Kabul airport situation.
We begin with the chaos at Kabul's airport. Thousands of people have been crowding the terminal and rushing the tarmac, hoping to flee the Afghan capital after its fall to the Taliban. A chaotic situation that prompted the U.S. military to fire shots into the air in a bid to control the crowd.
In which 2021, the Taliban took over from basically the Americans.
Well, yes, formerly the Afghan government under Ashraf Ghani and the Afghan National Security Forces, ANSDF.
The whole evacuation was led by the Americans, and the Europeans found themselves in a place where they had to heavily rely on the Americans to evacuate all their people, and also all the Afghans that had helped them throughout all those years.
Yeah.
So,
I remember footage of those days, people running after airplanes.
And I don't know if you remember it, but it was the Americans who secured the whole airport.
Yeah.
And so imagine if you have to use American planes, American security and everything. And if they say on Friday at 12 a.m., we're gone. And then from there on, it's your own job. And you can't go yourself and you can't take over, then you're fully reliant on that's what they've decided. So this is where really there was a realization, we actually might need something. And then the capacity became more of a reality in the politicians' minds. It became something that was seen as more necessary, even though, like I said, it's probably not going to change the whole face of what the EU crisis management is at the moment. But hopefully for them, they haven't created something completely useless, especially because now it's one force that is always available and it's not rotating, so it's always the same people and things like that.
Right. And imagine it's expensive even to just maintain a force like that on the ground.
Yeah, defense is expensive because you have to pay those people, you have to make sure the equipment's available, that it's modernized, and there are a lot more investment needed because they are still missing some what they call strategic enablers. So it's like logistics and medical capabilities and things like that. So it's not even fully formed yet, but it is what we call operational. Right. So that means technically it could be used tomorrow and it would do its job. Now, the politicians haven't yet endorsed or announced their willingness to use it, which will probably come at some point.
Yes, about this today, the Foreign Affairs Council is happening. Ministers are once again discussing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You've already said that these troops are not going to the border with Russia. But if they're not going there, where are they likely to go?
Where they are most likely to go at the moment, this has not been endorsed in any way. It's more informal discussions and assumptions would be in the Balkans because this is a neighborhood of the European Union.
Yeah.
And there are a few countries that are not always in friendly relationships with each other. So if there were to be a crisis, then maybe this is where it could first be used. Now, whether it will actually be is a big question. It's very likely that they stay without doing anything for a few months and maybe even a few years without doing anything because you need member states to agree that they can be used in a certain instance. So, for example, if tomorrow Syria falls again into an authoritarian state and a dictatorship, and here starts a war between Syria and neighborhood countries, evacuating all the European citizens, the people that work for them, because there's a lot of people there that are European, they work for the embassies, or like they work for the Red Cross or something like this. So if you want to evacuate people, you need to have planes, you need to have personnel, you need security. So, for example, that could be an option. You could deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Do we have enough equipment for that?
There's never enough, is kind of always what the military will tell you. Although the reason why we're talking about that force today is that there is enough to get a certain job done. Now, it probably can't do a very long run operation, or maybe its capabilities would be limited in certain areas. But it is here available if needed.
Mm-hmm. I guess we will have to test its efficiency from its first mission. Thank you, Aurélie.
Thank you, Jada.
This was Euractiv's podcast, Today in the EU. Sound design by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, research and production by Charles Cohen. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news and sign up for our newsletters. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platforms. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.